Confident, confident, confident. I can be confident, 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 confident. I can be confident at work.
Hello and welcome to the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and your confidence coach, Anna Manning, and today we're talking about why asking for help is hard and how to start doing it. Because I've recently had several conversations with people who've confessed that even when they want help and they need help, they find it incredibly difficult to ask for it. Can you relate to that? In this week's episode, we're going to explore why you might be finding it hard in the hope that shedding some light on the inner workings of your brain might help you to ask for help and be better supported. I started thinking about my take on this and where I am with it, as I often do when I'm preparing your podcast episode. And I realised that I ask for help more now than I used to. And I started to think, what was the turning point for me? What was the difference? And the other day, my partner and I were going somewhere and the car got a flat tyre. And so essentially, we were broken down on the side of the road. We didn't have a spare and we needed to call someone and, have a new tyre put on the car. Anyway, we'd broken down on a residential street and outside somebody's house. And the couple who owned the house came back from walking their dog and they said, "Oh, are you okay? Like, do you need help?" And we're like, "Oh, we've got a flat tire." And they were like, "Well, if you need any help, then we're just here. Come inside and ask us, like, we're in." And then a little later on, because we were there for like an hour and a half, a little later on, I was like, "Oh, I really need the loo. I think I'll go and, ask." And my partner was mortified. He was like, "What? You're going to go and ask if you can use their loo?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, because they said if you need any help, then you should ask." And they didn't have to volunteer that. They just did. And my partner was like, "What? You can't go and ask them that?" I was like, "But they literally told me that I could ask them that." Anyway, he kind of got a little bit in my head and I second guessed myself and I didn't go and ask them for the help that they had offered me. And afterwards, I was like, I didn't think anything of that. I thought that that would be fine because they told me that I could ask and they seemed genuine. But then my partner got in my head about it and I didn't. And afterwards, I was like, that was stupid. I should just have asked. Do you know if someone broke down outside my house and they were like, "Can I use your toilet?" I'd be like, "Yeah, sure, fine. I'm happy to help." And they were happy to help. But it just highlights that even when somebody's there saying, "I will help you. Would you like any help?" We're like, "Oh, no, they couldn't possibly actually mean it," when probably they did. Now, we've probably got all different levels of comfort when it comes to asking for help, receiving help. And it's worth having a little think about, what is your level of comfort? Like, how did you feel when I told that story about asking somebody if I could use their toilet? Were you like, "Oh my God, I can't believe she was going to ask them that"? Or were you like, "Yeah, that sounds sensible"? Or something in between? Because that might give you a little clue as to your level of comfort. And you might also know if you feel or struggle to ask for help, you might already be aware of that. So, this is going to be a really good episode for you. I've been reading a book called Regenerative Business. Now, this is a book for people who own businesses like me. So, it's probably not relevant for all of you, but there was a really good bit about how businesses thrive with collaboration. The book is by Sam Garcia, and I'm going to read a little extract of it because I think it's an important framing for us to think about this topic of asking for help. So, like so many issues that we discuss on the podcast, we think that this is an individual problem, an individual issue. Like, if I can't ask for help or I find it really hard, that is something to do with me. But this quote, this passage that I'm going to read you, gives us a clue that actually it might be a wider systemic issue and really just one that you're subject to rather than about you. So she says, if you have a hard time being supported by others, asking for help, or relying on others, and maybe feel like a burden for asking or a badass for doing it all on your own, this hyperindividualism is often a trauma response carried over from not getting your needs met as a child. You had to grow up quick, rely on yourself early, meet your own emotional needs, or suppress them and be low maintenance. And it's a result of our society being more separated. For example, we went from enjoying entertainment in groups, whether around fires or theatres, to being entertained within family units with radios and TVs. Now everyone has their own phone, which we stare at for our hyper customized data stream that feeds us nuggets of entertainment and capitalizes our attention. Some say we've never been more globally connected, but the truth is we're faking connection through social media and our devices, and the knockoff of true connection is causing more mental illness, suicide, and overall unhappiness than ever before. She goes on to say, what we actually need is more dense networks of connection, like the interwoven mycelium of fungi. This network, which looks like a nervous system in our bodies, communicates and transports nutrients quickly. It creates more health and resilience in a garden or an ecosystem. And that really made me think of this being a wider societal issue. I wonder if people who find it easy to ask for help are already part of a ecosystem which relies on mutual support, giving and receiving of support and reciprocity. A more connected community, a more connected society. Because the truth is that we all need help. We all need support. Nobody can actually do everything all on their own. Okay, there might be some people that go and live as a hermit or go and live on an island alone, but for most of us, that is not the way we live. We live in community, we live in society, we live in workplaces, and yet we can still feel this need, this drive, this hyper individualism within that. Because asking for help within a system of mutual support and reciprocity, presumably, is okay. So, is this a systemic issue and not an individual one? I think it's worth thinking about. And now, down to you. I've come up with a couple of questions that I think might help you if you struggle to ask for help to figure out why. And I want you to think of this broader issue first. It may just be that you've been raised in a particular way, that you live in a society where this kind of mutual reciprocity and support has not been provided or is not available, and therefore you've learned to do everything yourself. Maybe that's just what it is. But here's a couple of questions for you to uncover your own internal thinking, even if it's unconscious to you at the moment, about asking help or needing support. And I want you to just take a second and fill in the blank at the end of these two statements. In order to ask for help, I should be what? And maybe you even write this down and then just keep writing and see what comes out. It could be a really interesting insight. And the second question is, second fill in the blank statement, I should say. If I ask for help, it means that ... And again, either just think about it, or maybe if you've got a piece of paper to hand or your phone notes, just write it down. Let's start to lift the lid on why you find it hard to ask for help if you do. And I've got 5 ideas for you because I coach on this not infrequently. And I've been having conversations with people, doing my research, thinking about it as I'm preparing this podcast episode for you. So I put together 5 things which I see make it hard for people to ask for help. And the first is what we've already said: society being more separated, individual, disconnected. And within that kind of environment, maybe asking for help and that idea of mutual reciprocity isn't really a thing. And that might completely depend upon the culture that you're in. Now, I know we have podcast listeners who live all over the world because I look at the data. I love looking at that. There is literally not every country in the world, obviously, but so many of them are represented by people who listen to the podcast, which I love. Think about the culture that you grow up with, within your family, within your wider community, even within your country. Is there an idea that you should kind of be individualistic and do things yourself? Or do you rely a lot on other people for help and support? And is there this mutual reciprocity across people, across families, across communities? And think about this within your workplace, even within your team, if you have one. Is it very individualistic? Get on with your own thing, do your own thing. That might be the nature of your work. What's it like to ask for help within your organization? Are there people willing to step in, step up, share things out, support? Do you have ways of connecting and collaborating and offering that kind of support? Maybe that you do, and it may be that you don't take people up on it, or you struggle to take people up on it, or maybe that those things don't really exist. Number two, in things I see which make it hard for people to ask for help, is feeling like a burden. Do you feel like asking for help will make you a burden to others? If you do, obviously you're going to be less likely to ask for help because I'm guessing nobody really wants to class themselves as a burden. It kind of has a heavy connotation to it, right? A burden is like a heavy, bad thing that somebody has to carry. But is it true that if you ask someone for support, if you ask someone for help, that you are in fact a burden, a heavy, bad thing that they have to carry? Who knows? Maybe they might enjoy supporting you. Maybe they're fine about it. Maybe they want the opportunity to do the thing that you want help with. Maybe they love you and they'd be happy to support you. I wonder if they would describe it as a burden, especially if it's a discreet ask. Like if you're asking for a one off bit of help or support, I find it hard to imagine that somebody would categorize it as a burden. And yet, we might categorize it as a burden ourselves. So, really step back and think, is it a burden? Is it a heavy, hard thing that I'm asking somebody to carry? Or am I just asking for a lift to the train station? Am I just asking them to put their eyes on a piece of work that I've been staring at for hours and I need a second opinion on? The third thing that I see that can make it hard for people to ask for help is this idea people have that it means something about you if you have to ask for help. So, do you think that asking for help suggests that you're not capable or that somehow you're not good at your job or not good enough for your job? When I've been coaching people on this issue multiple times, what we have uncovered, which is previously out of their conscious awareness, is that they're thinking, if I need to ask for help, it means I am rubbish at my job or I can't do my job or I shouldn't be in my job. And it's funny, isn't it? What you're assuming that it means if you need to ask for help or support may or may not be true. A lot of the time, I'm guessing it's not true. Now, if you're asking somebody for help to do your entire job and you ask them that every day, every week, every month, maybe that does mean that there is a problem. But if you're asking somebody for some help, some support for a period of time, even one off things, does that mean that you're really rubbish at your job and that you shouldn't do it and it's evidence that you shouldn't be there? I doubt it. Most of the time, it's probably just evidence that you're a human and that you need a bit of help, you need a bit of support. It might even be evidence that you're quite self aware. You're aware that you're getting to your limit. You're aware that you might need a second pair of eyes on something. Or maybe it's evidence that you're a really good collaborator. But your brain's never going to offer you that, is it? Have you noticed that if you're making it mean something about you, like I'm rubbish at my job if I need to ask for help, or it means that I shouldn't be in the job, your brain's never making it mean something good about you, is it? It's never assuming, oh, if I ask for support with this, people will think I'm such a good community builder and collaborator. Ha! I bet no one's brains ever thought that in a million years. Instead, it thinks that you're rubbish at your job and you shouldn't even be there, which is a clue that it might be less of a fact and more of a fear. So I want you to, if this resonates with you, I want you to really ask yourself next time there's something you feel like you need help or support with, ask yourself the question, does this really mean that I'm rubbish at my job if I'm asking for support with this? I'll bet most of the time the answer is a big fat no. So you can go on and ask for support, safe in the knowledge that you're not rubbish at your job. The next thing I see that can make it hard for people is it's a risk sometimes to ask for help and support. And it can be a vulnerable thing to do. I remember a boyfriend that I used to have when I was in uni, and he was such a rubbish boyfriend. Should have got rid of him years before I did. But I would never ask him for anything because I knew that even if he said yes, ultimately it wouldn't happen and I would be disappointed. So to prevent the disappointment, I just stopped asking altogether. And this might be you. You might fear, or maybe you've been in a situation like I was. Maybe you're even in that now. I hope you're not, but you might be, where it really does feel like a risk to ask. Or maybe, like in my relationship, it actually just is pointless to ask. And once we've kind of got that rule embedded in our head, either that it's a big disappointment or it's a risk or it's pointless, we may apply that to other scenarios without really noticing. So I think that one relationship had an impact on my willingness to ask for help from everyone in my life, even though he was one particular person. And many other people in my life would be very happy and very willing to offer me help and support. So, could you have been in a position where you've sort of generalized out and now you probably don't ask for help and support, even if there may be areas or there may be people that would be happy or willing to give it to you? And you might want to just bring those people to mind now. So if there's people in your networks, if there's people in your organization, people in your team, people in your community, people in your family who you know for a fact would be willing to offer you help and support, maybe just make a note of those, mental or physical, because what that will do is serve to start kind of rewriting that internal narrative that you might have that it's pointless or it's risky. There may be people who you think, if I asked them, they would definitely be okay with it. Good to know. The last thing I see, which I think can make it really hard for people, and I've seen this one multiple times when I'm coaching, is this idea that you have to be perfect. Do you believe you have to be perfect, or that you should definitely always be striving for perfection? And part of that means not having to ask anyone for help or support, because perfect does everything on their own. Perfect probably helps and supports other people, possibly even more than you want to, but it doesn't involve an element of reciprocity. Perfect says you should help other people, but you should never ask for help from anyone else. If you have that kind of pattern of thinking and that perfectionist tendency, then that might be what's preventing you from asking for help and support or making it really difficult for you to do it. And it might not even be that obvious to you. But if you're secretly thinking, I have to be able to do, achieve, accomplish everything on my own, and asking for help means that I can't, you're probably not really going to ask for help. Why would you? That's evidence then that you're not perfect. And if you're not perfect, so if asking for help is evidence that you're not perfect, you might translate that into that's evidence that I'm rubbish, I'm a failure, I'm no good. This stuff sounds extreme, but believe me, it is part of perfectionist thinking. And if you identify with this, then this could be what is making you feel so uncomfortable about asking for help that you never really do it. So over to you. Do you recognize any of those? Because if you're believing, for instance, that you're a burden if you ask, it means something bad about you if you ask, it feels too risky to put yourself out there and ask, or you have to be perfect and asking means you're not, of course it's going to be hard for you to ask for help. These are valid reasons why you wouldn't. If I was genuinely believing that I'm a burden, that it means something bad about me, or that it's incredibly risky, or I have to be perfect so I can't ask, if I was genuinely believing those things, I wouldn't be asking for help. Because I don't want any of that. And I'm sure that you don't too. You don't want someone to think of you as a burden. You don't want people to think bad stuff about you. You don't want to take a really emotional risk that feels like it's going to end in rejection or disappointment. You don't want to admit that you're not perfect if you really think that you should be. It makes total sense. They're valid reasons if those things are true. But are they? And I'm encouraging you to reflect. Is it really true that if you ask for this one bit of support, that you are a burden? And you know what? You could even ask the person. Maybe you start this in a very low risk way. Maybe you don't even start this in work, or maybe you do with a colleague that you really trust. And you say, do you know, I'd really like to get some help with this, but I'm thinking that I'm going to be a burden if I ask you. And just watch their face. Maybe they'll say, what? No, honestly, I'm happy to help. And maybe they genuinely are, especially if you help and support others. So you give to that system of interconnectedness and reciprocity and support, but you don't allow others to support and help you. And I want to leave you with a quote from Tamu Thomas, who's the author of Women Who Work Too Much. And she says, "Dear one, it's time to take the risk of softening enough to admit that you need to be held and acknowledged too. There are gentle hands waiting to embrace you. If you let them, if you let you." I can tell you that when I finally started allowing people to support me, I must say how nice it was to be supported and held and helped. I enjoyed the experience of being supported, honestly, as much as I enjoy the experience of helping and supporting others. And how nice it was for me to allow other people to feel good about helping me too. All right, that is all I have for you this week. Go forth and become part of that interconnected, reciprocal network of help and support, especially if that's the kind of society you want to live in, if that's the kind of community that you want to live in, if that's the kind of workplace you want to inhabit. Let it start with you. And if you want to come and work with me, there are 2 ways that you can do that right now. Professional women are invited to come and join us inside the Members Club. That is an ongoing membership where you can join for a quarter or a year, and you'll have access to group coaching calls, recorded modules, and live trainings, all of which are designed to support you in your professional development. The other option that you have is to come and work with me privately. One-on-one coaching where we will unpack your particular challenges, we'll look at your particular scenarios, we'll look at any areas where you're currently not feeling confident, and I will help you to build and grow your confidence. Both of those options can start with a free call to see if either or both options are right for you. And I'll tell you if I think they are. I will also tell you if I think they're not. So click the link in the show notes if you want to take either of those options. Alternatively, if you want to take the podcast learning a step further, we have a free class which is happening on Monday, the 28th of October. So if you're listening to this in real time and that time hasn't passed, click the link in the show notes. Come and join us in that class. The class is called How to Grow Your Professional Confidence. It's free and it will help you to take everything you've learned in the podcast and actually start applying it so you can feel more confident at work. Feel free to pass it on to your people, your networks, your organizations. I want the information that I teach in that class, which I also teach in the podcast, to be in the hands of as many professionals as possible. I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.
Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident. Confidence, confidence,